morning and welcome to my neighborhood. It's Earth Day today. We have some good news. There is a company based in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, Canada, called CarbonCure. And what they've done, they've been around for a while, and what they've done is provided a scalable, cost-effective mechanism to sequester carbon, to sequester CO2 in concrete. Now, concrete has been a real problem because it generates quite a lot of CO2 in its production. This makes it go the other way. This sequesters the carbon in the concrete, no upfront costs, very little retooling, and it can be scaled rapidly all over the world. Currently, it's being scaled all over North America. I don't know about the other countries. What they're doing improves the quality of the concrete. It creates nanoparticulate carbonates within the concrete, permanently binding the CO2 into the concrete and making it stronger. But they didn't stop there. When you make concrete, there's often a slurry of waste that has a lot of concrete components in it. So you're paying for the inputs and then you pay to dispose of the outputs. It's quite thick. It's kind of like a milkshake. And they've got a way to recycle that back into the concrete as well. And probably a few other things. The X price for carbon capture, I think it's $20 million, so it's not insubstantial. And they are in the 10 finalists. So that's interesting Earth Day news in terms of climate change. Number one. The second one that caught my attention was paint. It's called Ultra White, and it's made with sulfide molecules of varying sizes. And boy, is it white. You know, we had the black a year or two ago that just absorbed all the light in sight. It's like looking into a hole. This white does not absorb all but 1.5% of the light falling on it, and that includes the UV. So if it only absorbs less than 2%, it actually does not get warm. The best other paints out there are absorbing 10 to 20%, mostly in the UVA range, because they're using tin oxide and that kind of thing to become white. But the bottom line of this is if you use it as a coating for a roof, or a wall, I guess, but a roof in particular because it's more horizontal to the sky, you could save in a warm place that you're using air conditioning on the order of 10 kilowatts in terms of power utilization for a house. So this cuts down on the power required. Air conditioning is a huge user of power. Not only that, air conditioning takes heat that's already been accumulated and transfers it outside. This ends up warming whole neighborhoods. The paint, on the other hand, they say reflects the spectrum back to deep space. So it's not generating heat from the light in the first place. So we have less heating of our metropolitan areas. So those are the two really interesting bits, and there's lots of others in terms of material science out there. But those are the ones that struck me today, and they have really large leverage. You know, one that's been around for quite a while is the Nest thermostat, and it's a technological solution. And one of the fellows that started it had been a designer for the iPhone at Apple, and people thought he was nuts. He was going to go out and he's going to do a thermostat? Really? But I'm sure this has changed, but because the thermostat learns and because it pays attention to outside temperature, inside temperature, and the rhythms, complex rhythms of your day, and makes adjustments, they figure they have, by selling this thermostat, reduced the need for electricity for heating and cooling, by about 5 nuclear power plants so far. And that was probably a year ago, so I'm probably off by that now. So, you know, the use of intelligence to create new materials, or just look at how we're using what we have, is really important. We're also seeing a meeting of leaders, and they're revising their estimates of getting to net zero by 2030. My concern with that, and I'm hoping I don't have to be concerned anymore, is that they're backloading the process. And backloading processes in complex systems when the processes are already running, it's likely a really, really bad idea. It's like with the pandemic in Australia, they had said early on that 1 day of delay in implementing some strategy, reducing transmission, ended up costing at least a week in continuation. So we're looking at those kind of leverage points for climate alteration also, because they're compounded, complex, adaptive systems. In general terms, Earth Day is kind of interesting. I mean, it's a very nice thing to celebrate this planet we're on, but it implies something more. It implies the synergies, the ecologies that include everything. And when you talk about everything, it starts to get interesting, because we're not only including us and right down into, you know, slightly less tolerated things like well-known viruses and the molecules that create them, but the history of how all these interplays happen. And of course, that history includes not only stuff originating on Earth, but other things. For instance, recently, through some incredibly astute sleuthing and looking at data, we've uncovered these very large, irregular elements deep within the Earth's mantle. I don't know whether you call it the mantle, but just outside the core. And they are surmising, the researchers, are surmising that these might be the remnants of a planetary collision in our very long past that threw off the moon, like created the moon. But they're not dissolved and homogeneous. They're, continent-sized, large, irregular blobs that may have differential conductive values and stuff. And it's interesting. When robins are following me through the trees here. When we look at the Van Allen belts, the lovely protective shield that we have around the Earth, generated by energy flows mediated by the magnetic field of the Earth. When solar emissions are lower, it looks like more like metal filings around a permanent magnet. You get a lovely arc on both sides showing the magnetic fields. When the solar wind is higher, it gets blown back further. So we get a closer connection on the sun side and much less of a connection on the other side. And I always wondered how that affected other things on Earth. And, I always thought that it was interesting that there seemed to be a few studies out there that show psychological effects when we have high bombardment from solar flares and that kind of thing. But a while back there was a report from a satellite that was shielded from the Earth by the moon. And they were going, well, yeah, but the gamma radiation from deep space, from outside our solar system, is quite high. And the high energy particles coming from the sun act to increase the Van Allen belts around the Earth and reduce the amount of gamma radiation that hits the Earth. So it cuts both ways, as do most complex systems. Somebody's been making an alternate trail here, removing logs to clamber over. That's interesting. So what I'm saying is that just like historically, when we thought everything revolved around the Earth, the sun, the moon, Jupiter, Mars, everything kind of went around the Earth, kind of like Discworld, The Earth sits on the back of the elephants that stand on the back of the giant tortoise. Flat Earth theory made real. A Discworld series of books by Terry Pratchett. Lovely writing, a beautiful speculative nature of our current institutions, including young witches and old witches and all manner of magical beasts, including Death, who's a character in the book who rides a horse called Binky. Okay, so back to Earth Day. We could consider that often the way we look at the Earth on Earth Day is anthropocentric. That is, we're humanizing the nature of the ecosystem. We're pretending it's like us. And in a sense it is. We're much more complex than we realize. But the Earth is not isolated. Somebody said, well, you're standing on Earth, how fast are you moving? Because the Earth is rotating. If you had a time machine and you moved a minute forward in time, where would you end up standing? Because the Earth has rotated. Well, the Earth not only rotates, but it's moving around the sun. So where would you be standing in a minute of time? A second of time? How far would the Earth have moved if you did not? But there's another aspect here. Not only is the Earth rotating and moving around the sun, but the sun and the rest of the solar system, as portrayed in elementary school science books, it sort of sits in one place, the sun is stable and everything else orbits around it. And in fact, all the planets affect the sun. They cause it to move. They cause stresses and stuff around the sun. But the sun is moving through space at a great rate with the solar system. So if you actually were going to look at it, the solar system is spiraling through space at a great rate. So the Earth is spinning, we're orbiting around the sun and the solar system is rocketing through space, and we feel none of it because we only feel acceleration. We do not feel velocity. Otherwise, the people in the space station who are traveling at, 17,000 kilometers per hour to maintain that equilibrium between falling into the Earth and shooting out to space, they would not feel weightless if we felt velocity. And probably, given that we're in one of the spiral arms of the galaxy, that's also moving. So there's more. What I'm trying to say is that in much the same way that historically we looked at the Earth as the center of the universe, it's really easy on Earth Day to not only celebrate Earth, the wondrous, complex systems that take tiny seeds and create big trees, and the mycelium that link the roots of these trees, the forest floors, is pretty just amazing. But not only are we on Earth, but from the very smallest things, the neutrinos, and up to large things like molecules and atoms and things, the various forces that are at play, quantum forces, gravity, and magnetism, and all those other wonderful things that they're finding out about, right out to vast galactic scales. That's the Earth. That's the Earth. We are part of something which is much larger, and everything we learn along the way talks to that. That's why we go and look at the stars. I wonder if anybody saw meteors last night when they were looking at the stars. It's the meteor shower, I think. So when we learn about a virus, how it adapts, how we adapt, when we learn how to overcome gravity by jumping, by flying a kite, by flying a plane, by building rockets that take us into orbit and beyond. What have we learned about materials, about the impacts we make on us, but more importantly, on everything else? Because in the same way that the Earth is not an isolated, complex system, it's impacted by a lot of things. In the same way that it's not an isolated, complex system, we are not an isolated, complex system. We're part of this thing. So, Earth Day. Celebration of everything, the Earth, our place in it. What do you think? So, if you know of other wonderful things like Nest thermostat, ultra-white paint, CarbonCure, carbon capture, green bonds, and things like holochain that implement blockchain in a socially aware way without the high energy costs of blockchain. Please put them in the comments. Talk to me. I'd like to know. Thank you for being here today. I see you, and please subscribe, like, all those good things. And I hope you're safe, sound, and have a great Earth Day. See you next time. Bye now.